This is the fourth episode on becoming a world champion in asset recovery, Hong Kong Experience.
Dear colleagues, I'm glad to see you. My name is Vladimir Kozin, and I am the regional advisor of UNODC on issues of fighting against corruption in Central Asia. And we are delighted to see you in the fourth round of our seminar series, which are jointly organized by ARIN WCA Network, UNODC, and regional platform on increased implementation of the UN Convention with the support of Norway. Dear colleagues, I remind you that we have another unique opportunity to be acquainted with the experience of Hong Kong in the area of asset recovery, and our experts from Independent Commission Against Corruption are here. As you know, this is one of the first specialized anti-corruption agencies, which was founded in 1974, based on a model of KPK, and many anti-corruption agencies copied this model, including the Central Asia, and the asset recovery issue is of very high importance in the Commission's daily work. And last time we discussed the general legal institutional system in Hong Kong regarding asset recovery, and now we can discuss the specific cases with aiming at the restraint and forfeit of assets. And I will switch to English to introduce our respected speakers.
And I would like to start with Mr. Sudhir GIDWANI, who is a distinguished expert in forensic accounting and financial investigations with over 38 years of dedicated service at ICAC. As the head of the Asset Recovery Office, he specializes in tracing, restraining, and confiscating proceeds of crime, contributing significantly to global anti-corruption and financial integrity efforts. Recognized by the High Court and District Court of Hong Kong as a forensic accounting expert, Mr. GIDWANI has investigated high-profile cases involving listed companies, banks, and financial institutions, tackling issues such as corruption, fraud, market manipulation, and money laundering. His expertise has been instrumental in shaping international financial crime enforcement strategies, with contributions to organizations including FATF, Asia-Pacific Group on Money Laundering, Globin Network, and the International Association of Anti-Corruption Authorities. Beyond his investigative work, Mr. GIDWANI has played a pivotal role in training anti-corruption and law enforcement agencies across Asia, sharing his knowledge to strengthen financial crime prevention efforts. Mr. GIDWANI holds a Bachelor of Commerce degree. His professional credentials include Fellow Chartered Accountant, Certified AML Specialist, and Certified Fraud Examiner. His outstanding contributions have been recognized with prestigious accolades, including the Certified Fraud Examiner of the Year Award 2020 by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, USA, and the ICAC Medal for Meritorious Service in 2021. His extensive experience, leadership, and commitment to financial integrity continue to have a lasting impact on the global fight against financial crime and corruption. Mr. GIDWANI, we're really honored to have you with us again today. And also, we have a pleasure of having with us Mr. Ho MING Calvin. Calvin is a forensic accountant of the operations department of the ICAC. He is a member of the Hong Kong Institute of Certified Public Accountants, a certified AML specialist, and a chartered financial analyst charter holder. Calvin has over 10 years of experience in forensic accounting, financial investigation, and auditing. He has rendered professional assistance in numerous complex financial investigations, including corruption, securities crimes, listed company fraud, and money laundering. Calvin has also assisted in preparing expert reports on matters related to tracing of crime proceeds and money laundering for criminal proceedings in the Hong Kong courts. Thank you so much, Calvin, for being with us. And without further ado, I would like now give the floor to our distinguished experts for their presentations. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Kozin, for your very kind words and introduction. Carrying on from episode 2, where we spoke about the asset recovery regime in Hong Kong, this afternoon we shall be focusing on case studies, and these case studies will encompass the practical legal challenges that we face in asset recovery. We'll also show you an example of how third-party rights can be preserved in provisional measures when we restrain assets, and asset recovery through civil proceedings. Now, if you recollect, on the last occasion, some of the practical legal challenges that we mentioned about were the nexus between assets and the offense, which basically we face these challenges during MLA requests. Then when assets are held by nominees, if assets are gifted away, then how we try and confiscate those assets, quantifying the benefit that the defendant derived from the crime, and piercing the corporate veil. So let me hand over to Calvin, who will speak on the first 2 cases, and then I shall come back on the remaining. So Calvin, it's over to you, please.
Thank you very much, Sudhir. And good afternoon, Mr. Kozin, and everybody who's joining us in this webinar today. It's a great pleasure to meet you, and I'm Calvin from ICAC. Now, I certainly understand that Friday is not exactly the most ideal time for sharing on heavy topics like asset recovery, but hopefully the 7 cases that we have selected will be interesting enough to keep you all awake at this time. Now, of course, we are also extremely lucky to have Sudhir, our head of asset recovery office, here today with us to share with us his firsthand experience in tackling some of the most difficult asset recovery cases that the ICAC has faced. Now, I'll begin by sharing the first case on trading corruption, company corruption case. This is actually a classic private sector corruption case here in Hong Kong involving illegal rebates. And importantly, this case looked into the matter of piercing of the corporate veil, as well as the quantification of economic benefits of a bribe offerer. Now, let me begin by telling you a little bit about the background of this case. Now, Ho is a proprietor of a garment trading company, and we allege that he had offered bribes in the form of illegal rebates to Lai and Lee, respectively, the merchandiser of manufacturer A and manufacturer B. So over the span of 7 years, he had offered bribes in total value of Hong Kong dollars 700,000 and renminbi, that's Chinese dollar, $8 million, to Lai and Lee respectively. Now in return, Lai and Lee were offering a number of corrupt assistance to Ho, basically to help Ho to secure the purchase orders from their respective employers. Also, Lee had issued a number of bogus orders where Ho did not actually have to supply the underlying goods, despite having received the full payments. Ho and Lee would then share such proceeds in a ratio of 20% to 80%. That also explains why the amount of illegal rebates received by Lee is much higher than that of Lai. So, proving the substantive offense of this case was not difficult. We managed to secure a conviction without going to a full trial. But then Ho, the offerer of bribes, was not happy about our action against his assets, and he contested against our application for confiscation of his company's bank balances. We then have to look into the precise amount of economic benefits that he has obtained in this case. Now, for the acceptors of this case, Lai and Lee, is rather straightforward. The advantage that they have obtained would be the bribe amount that they have received. But for Ho, we've noted that with the corrupt assistance from Lai and Lee, his company has actually obtained total revenue in the total sum of $68 million from manufacturer A and B, out of which 8 million Hong Kong dollar was from bogus orders. But then, is it fair for us to say that the entire amount was the process of crime that we should confiscate? Now, the defense argued against it with the following grounds. Basically, they're saying that Ho had compensated in full for his share of the bogus orders to manufacturer B. So he should not, the $8 million revenue generated from those bogus orders should be excluded from the calculation of benefit. They're also raising an argument that the payments from manufacturers A and B were not received by Ho himself, but to his trading company, a separate legal entity, and Ho had derived no personal benefit out of it. Thirdly, they're claiming that it is disproportionate to confiscate the total revenue tainted by bribes because the trading company had already supplied the underlying goods to manufacturers A and B, and thereby given the full value of those contracts. Lastly, they are saying that in the event the court found that confiscation is appropriate, the court should still limit the amount to net profit because all other costs of transactions were incurred in an entirely lawful way. Now, in response to these arguments, basically, we agreed that Ho had already fully restituted the victim company, manufacturer B, in respect of those bogus purchase orders. So we agreed to drop the value from the calculation of benefit. As for the defense claim that Ho and his trading company was two separate legal entities, we take the view that it's an appropriate case to lift this so-called corporate veil. Well, it is our findings that Ho was, in fact, the sole director, shareholder, as well as authorized signatory of the bank account of his trading company. So essentially, he was the sole and ultimate controller of that trading company. Also, the bribe payments were made out of the trading company's account, and the purchase orders were obtained and performed also by this trading company. So essentially, we are saying that Ho and his trading company were acting together in this corrupt activity. Okay, we also agreed that certain transaction costs of the tainted orders can be deducted from the total revenue. But to us, the proportionate order would be to restrain and confiscate the gross profit, meaning that the direct cost of production should be confiscated, as opposed to the claims of defense that the net profit should be taken. Now, net profit would take into account also other general and administrative expenses such as wages and salaries, rental payments, and as well as other, for example, advertisement expenses, etc. So these will be incurred irrespective of whether the tainted orders are placed. So that's the reason why we think they should not be deducted in calculating Ho's benefit. And in any event, our position was that Ho's benefit should logically exceed the total amount of bribes that he had paid. Otherwise, he would not have the incentive to commit the crime consecutively for 7 years consecutively. Now, alternatively, if the court is unwilling to accept to pierce off this corporate veil, we will go for Ho's benefit through the direct remunerations that he has received from the trading company. So this table here basically shows the various figures that the prosecution and the defense has raised. And essentially, we are arguing that the gross profit of the tainted orders up to Hong Kong dollar 7.5 million should be confiscated, where the defense is arguing that net profit of 0.6 million instead should be confiscated. Now, we also have to be pragmatic. Now, in this specific case, we are facing a couple of difficulties. Importantly, we are uncertain whether the trading company's profit could be said to be Ho's personal benefit out of the scam. And in the event, the court did not accept that they are two separate, they are the same entity, the direct remuneration of $1 million would be a less desirable amount to us. Also, even if the court is willing to pierce off the corporate veil, still, we are not sure whether they would accept our proposition that the gross profit should be confiscated, or they would want us to examine and look for some direct expenses to be deducted. So therefore, we have also made an independent assessment, and actually $4 million could be said to be direct expenses also incurred as a result of the tainted orders. So a more prudent approach would be to take the economic benefit as the figure of Hong Kong dollar 3.5 million. So you can see that the gaps is actually closing. So in the spirit of disposing the matter more efficiently and to save time and cost for further litigation, the defense and us actually settled on a deal to settle the confiscation order at $2.35 million. So with our agreement, the court ordered the same for Ho to make a payment within 6 months, and otherwise he would be subject to a jail term of 35 months, and Ho complied with the confiscation order at the end.
Okay, the next case is a Hong Kong case where a top government counsel was convicted of corruption. This case also resulted in civil proceedings, and there's a reason for that. I'll come to that later. But the person involved was a person by the name of Warwick Reed, and he was the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions. So we have the Department of Justice, which is the Secretary of Justice, is the head of the Department of Justice. Under him, he has the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the Director of Public Prosecutions, is supported by the Deputy Director of Public Prosecutions, in this case, Warwick Reed. Warwick Reed was the head of the Commercial Crime Unit, which advises on prosecutions on major commercial frauds and corruption. The allegation is that he accepted bribes from solicitors and barristers so that he could, obstruct prosecutions. He would advise the ICAC, or he would advise the police, that we do not have sufficient evidence against the defendants, and therefore he does not give consent to prosecute them. If the evidence was very strong, then he would advise that, yes, we can prosecute, but he would advise that we prosecute them on very minor charges. So that was the way he obtained huge amount of bribes from solicitors and from barristers to either advise non-prosecution or advise very minimal prosecution against the defendants. Now, the bribes that he received actually went through his family members and associates so that he could conceal the proceeds of crime. We tried to explain in this fund flow chart how money went through, and you can see how complicated it was. From the top left, the bribes were received in Hong Kong dollars and Singapore dollars. They were paid to Reed, who then transferred the money to Singapore into his mother's bank account. From the mother's bank account, the money went out and went into Taiwan to an associate of Reed. From there, he purchased gold bars and then sold the gold bars in Taiwan, used those proceeds to remit to his attorney in Taipei. His attorney in Taipei then remitted the money to Reed's bank account in New Zealand, from where he bought some property. The property he purchased was kiwi farms in New Zealand. Then the rest of the money, the attorney in Taipei remitted to the United Kingdom. From United Kingdom, the money came back to Hong Kong. From Hong Kong, the money was remitted first to Reed's attorney in Taipei, then to a trust in Vanuatu, also to his parents-in-law in UK and New Zealand, also to his sister-in-law in Australia and New Zealand, and also to a trust that was set up in Vanuatu for the benefit of Reed's children. So this fund flow exercise really was a very complex exercise for us to trace. I want to now explain that how he escaped from Hong Kong. He went from Hong Kong first to Macau. From Macau, he went to the mainland of China. From mainland China, he obtained a false passport. Using a false passport, he came back to Hong Kong, but only in transit. He did not go through immigration. From transit, he went to Philippines, and then he stayed in Philippines for a long period of time. there was no extradition between Hong Kong and the Philippines. So therefore, we could not extradite him from Philippines to Hong Kong. However, because he entered Philippines on a false passport, the Philippines government was happy to arrest him for the possession of a false document and deport him to Hong Kong because he entered Hong Kong on a false passport. So he came back to Hong Kong, and upon his arrival in Hong Kong, he was arrested by the ICAC at Hong Kong airport, and then we took him to court basically for a corruption offense of maintaining assets disproportionate to his official emoluments. And he pleaded guilty to controlling assets of 12.4 million. He was sentenced to 9 years imprisonment. This sentence was reduced to 8 years because he agreed to provide us testimony against the solicitors and barristers that had paid him bribes. And he was ordered to pay his ill-gotten gains to the Hong Kong government. Now, unfortunately, he did not pay that money. So we then had to institute civil proceedings in New Zealand, because that's where all his assets were, to recover his ill-gotten gains. At the time these proceedings were ongoing, there was no MLA agreement between Hong Kong and New Zealand. So we thought the best way was to engage a lawyer, a firm of solicitors to recover those proceeds. Reed tried his best to thwart our attempts to get those monies back. But the New Zealand court held that the bribe money that was received by Reed and the land that was acquired by him was held on constructive trust for the Hong Kong government. And the land bought by Reed and his associates was again held on trust and had to be given over to the Hong Kong government. So we were successful then in in selling his properties and remitting the money back to Hong Kong and recovering his ill-gotten gains. So that was another successful case that this time, which Hong Kong got the money from the bribe that Warwick Reed had received and invested his proceeds in New Zealand. The next case, a pretty straightforward case, but this one I'm going to explain how we not only took the benefit, but we took the accrued benefit from this particular case. It relates to a mortgage loan where a borrower made a false representation to the bank. Now, in Hong Kong, the rules allow, if you're obtaining a mortgage for a residential property and the intention is to rent out the property, that is not use the property for yourself, then the bank is willing to give you a mortgage to the extent of 50% of the value of the property. However, if the property being purchased is less than $7 million, then the bank would be prepared to give you 60% of the value of the property. However, at the time the defendant obtained the mortgage loan, there was a program called the Mortgage Insurance Program, which allows mortgage insurance to banks, whereby the banks would then allow 80% value of the property to be given out as a mortgage. So the borrower in this case applied for a mortgage loan under this scheme and was granted a loan or a mortgage of 80% of a property that she purchased for $6 million. Now, as I explained earlier, this would only be given if she is using this property for herself and does not rent out the property. She falsely declared to the bank that she was using the property for herself, and therefore the bank allowed her 80% and gave a mortgage of $4.86 million. Now, she gave the property on rent, and to the first tenant, she gave it out at $14,800 per month. And then after that tenancy agreement got over after a year, she then gave another tenant, she gave a tenancy agreement at $17,300 per month. In the meantime, the bank asked her to reconfirm that the property was for self-use and she is not renting out the property. She gave the false reconfirmation that yes, the property is for self-use. When that tenancy agreement got over, she again increased the rent and rented out to tenant be for an increased sum of $17,500. Now, she was convicted of fraud. So now the question comes, how much can we confiscate from her? So the way we calculated is that, yes, she did get the property for $6 million, but now the property is valued at $6.6 million. So there is an appreciation in the value of the property by $600,000. So that, we say, is the additional benefit that she derived from the property. In addition, we wanted to confiscate the rental income that she derived from this property because she was not supposed to rent out the property. So we calculated her total benefit to be 1.338 million, which is the sum of the appreciation in the value of the property and the rental income that she derived. But however, because she only obtained 80% mortgage, we applied the 80% formula and we confiscated 1.07 million from her. So there was no argument regarding our confiscation. We took this matter to court. The court accepted our calculation. She did not challenge our calculation, and the judge gave a confiscation order in the sum of 1.07 million and ordered her to pay the sum within 6 months, failing which she will have to serve an additional imprisonment of 25 months. Needless to say, she paid this money that very day. Now, the last case that I want to share with you is the false letter of credit liquidity case. This is actually a case in relation to deceased proceedings where the defendant passed away before the matter went to court. Now, the name of the deceased person is Mr. Lau, and he was the owner of a company called Evercrown. Evercrown was engaged in fuel oil trading. Now, he opened a bills discounting facility with China Everbright Bank. In the meantime, his brother in the mainland, he opened letters of credit with two Shenzhen companies, one being Shenzhen Industrial Bank and the other being Shenzhen China CITIC Bank. Now, the brother, pretended or purported to show that he is purchasing fuel oil from Evercrown in Hong Kong. So what happened was that Lau, when he got the bills of exchange as a result of these letters of credit, he used these fictitious documents and discounted the bills of exchange with his banks in Hong Kong to the extent of nearly 50 million US dollars. And as soon as he got this money from the bank, he channeled the money back to his brother's companies in Shenzhen, and his brother could then use the money for 1 year. Having used the 1 year, the money for a year, he then repaid the monies to the bank. So actually, nobody lost money in this. The banks will repay the money, but the brothers' companies then could use the money for 1 year on the pretext of falsely pretending that fuel oil had been purchased and presenting false documents to the banks. This is actually a fun flow of how the money, was channeled through. So if you just look at first, what happened was that the companies controlled by Lau's brothers purportedly purchased money from Evercrown. The companies in Shenzhen applied to the two banks for letters of credit, which were then issued in favor of Evercrown. Evercrown then discounted the bills of exchange worth $50.6 million with their bank in Hong Kong, and then they passed on the money back to Lau's brothers' companies in Hong Kong. And what happened was, at the end of this whole exercise, it was only about $443,000 Hong Kong dollars that was retained by Lau in Hong Kong. The rest of the money was all sent back to Shenzhen, and then the brother paid back the banks. So we had actually got a restraint order in Hong Kong, and we quantified the benefit at that time at 393 million, which was the value of the LCs Now, when we got the restraint order in 2015, the law in Hong Kong was the benefit was actually the entire gross proceeds of the LCs. But it so happened that we had another case where the Court of Final Appeal ruled that we cannot actually confiscate the entire 393 million. In that, they said that we have to confiscate the economic benefit that was derived by the defendant from the crime. So the economic benefit could only be $443,537 is the money he retained from the discounting proceeds that he got. So actually our confiscation amount, although the restraint amount was 393 million, we could only confiscate 443 million. That's because of a court of final judgment in another case saying that we are only restricted to confiscating the economic benefit. So during the intervening period, between the time we restrained the proceeds and at the time we actually was supposed to go to trial, Lau passed away from lung cancer. And therefore, we made an application to the court of a non-conviction-based forfeiture on the basis that he is a deceased person, and we would like to, confiscate the proceeds from a deceased person. So we actually confiscated the assets from his estate. The matter went to court. The lawyers representing the estate did not challenge our confiscation, and we got $443,000. So basically, in Hong Kong, for non-criminal based forfeiture, we can do so only for a deceased person or a person who has absconded. All other confiscation proceedings are based upon a criminal conviction. So that actually completes our 7 cases. I'm happy to take questions if there are any arising from our cases. It's actually one. Mr. Kozin, would you like to, I understand there are some questions that have come up. Would you like to just?
Yes. Yes. First of all, thank you so much for very comprehensive explanations and presentation of those cases. We do understand that the material is very complex. It actually requires understanding of a lot of details and also background of the cases, but I think you have done a very good job of addressing all those elements. And indeed, we do have already questions from the audience to you. I think some of those elements have been touched upon in your presentations, but for our audience, I think it may be interesting to get more practical details. So let me read the question from Mr. Kodir Kuliyev. Are there incentives or immunity mechanisms used in Hong Kong to encourage voluntary restitution or cooperation, perhaps reduced penalties? And how do such mechanisms avoid creating loopholes? For example, that corrupt could enjoy the corruption proceeds for a while, and then they just conclude a settlement, but only once they get caught or investigated. So how you balance
Yeah,
this?
thank you. I think there are 2 questions in one. So I shall address the first part of the question. Okay, in Hong Kong, confiscation is part of sentencing. So when a defendant is convicted after trial, then the judge has to sentence him. But before he sentences him, we, the prosecution, have to inform the judge that we are going to be applying for a confiscation order. The reason for this is that the judge must take into account that the prosecution will take away some of his assets, and the judge may, reduce a bit of his sentence on the basis that that some of his assets will go back either to the victim or go back to the Hong Kong government. So the law states that if we are to make an application for confiscation, it has to be made before sentencing. It cannot be made after sentencing. So that probably the judge may take into consideration and give some discount on the amount of sentence that he's going to impose. Now, at the time of confiscation, there could be a negotiation with the prosecution. Let's say, for example, I want to confiscate $10 million from the defendant. And the defendant may enter into a negotiation with us and say, look, rather than go through a trial, in order to save time, in order to save costs, would you agree if I voluntarily surrender, say, $8 million or $9 million? Would you agree to that? So then that we may consider, we could enter into a negotiation. We got to look at how strong our evidence is on confiscation. What are the complexities of in this case? For example, the case that Calvin spoke, the very first case, that was a complicated case on the trading company, on gross profit, net profit, piercing the corporate veil. If we feel that, well, that the defense arguments could be strong, we may negotiate and say, yes, okay, we will accept 8 million instead of 10, or we'll accept 9 million instead of 10. On the other hand, if we feel that our case is very strong, there's nothing to negotiate, we will not accept, and we'll say, fine, no, we'll go ahead to trial. We're very confident that we're going to get 10 million from you. So, I mean, we do in a way, the way the law is in Hong Kong is that criminals are aware that if they commit a crime, we will go after them, we will confiscate their assets, they will not benefit from crime. That is a very big deterrent for a criminal. That, look, not only will I go to prison, but I will even lose the fruits of my crime. So we are actually very, very proactive in this approach. So, so criminals have to think twice, that if they get caught, not only they go to prison, they will lose the money as well. So that probably, hopefully answers your first part of the question. The second is, how do you avoid creating loopholes? Example, one can steal, enjoy the money for a while, and then return if get caught. Well, the answer is, I'm not saying that the ICAC is successful in catching all the criminals. There are criminals who get away. There are criminals who do not get caught, and of course, they will enjoy the fruits of crime. And if they get away and we are not aware of it, there is no complaint, and of course, they get to enjoy it. I mean, there's nothing really we can do about it. But I think every criminal, I believe, when they commit a crime, they always have to look over their shoulder. They always have to be scared that maybe one day law enforcement will catch up and they will get caught. But again, I think in every jurisdiction, there are criminals that get away. I mean, that's something that we have to accept in life. And if they get away, surely they're not going to voluntarily, put their hands up and say, let's take the money from me. They're not going to do that. So it's just that we try our best to catch as many as we can, and then make the laws as strong as possible, so that if they get caught, they realize that they will go to prison and also surrender their crime proceeds. I hope I've answered your questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. GIDWANI. I think you indeed answered that question. So let me now go to the next question. It's a practical question.
Yeah.
And basically, the main interest is to understand whether you keep an eye at the accused who already served his sentence, and to make sure that after his release, he is not involved in corruption or crime or fraud, and that he is not acquiring new assets after his release.
Okay, it's a good question there. I think the answer is no. Because when a person is released from prison and has served his time, then the Hong Kong government gives him a chance to reform. He is then allowed to start new business, take up new employment, and start life again. Because we believe that he has served his time and he has now become a good boy. But not necessarily that he's a good boy. He could again go back and go back to his old tricks. And then if he gets caught, then we get him again. We arrest him again and we confiscate his assets again. There is nothing wrong in him, what you call, starting a new life with and earning new income, or what you call starting a new business with clean funds. There's nothing wrong in it. I mean, we in fact encourage that. We want, because we hope that whilst he's in custody, that he's reformed. They give lectures to him, they train them, and they teach them to be good citizens. And that when he comes out, and we really hope that he is a good citizen. So we don't use resources on tracking him to see whether he's again getting into dirty business. No, we don't. I mean, if we had the resources, maybe, but we just don't have those resources. So regretfully, no. And I hope that answers that question.
Okay, yeah, I think it's very clear. Next question is from the RNWCA Secretariat. It's a technical question, and it is about what kind of specific types of information Hong Kong legislation requires financial institutions and other entities to provide to law enforcement agencies during asset tracing and asset recovery investigations.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we have various laws in Hong Kong that allows us to what you call get search warrants on financial institutions, or to get production orders on financial institutions. But before we do that, we have something known as the Fraud and Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force. Now, this is a task force that has been set up by the Hong Kong Police, of which also the ICAC is a member. The customs are also a member, and about 29 major banks. So we actually share intelligence amongst ourselves. So we can share intelligence, and from that intelligence, of course, intelligence cannot be used as evidence. So once we get the intelligence, we then have a direction as to what search warrants we should get, on whom we should get, which financial institution has the information that we want, and then we go to the courts, we get our search warrants, and then we serve it on the banks and get the information. So previously, without the Financial Money Laundering Intelligence Task Force, it was a bit more arduous, because we used to get search warrants on banks that we believe had the information, and then many times the banks come back to us and say, no, we don't have anything, and that just wastes our time and resources. So with this intelligence information, it just narrows down our work, and we can get the information far more quickly.
Thank you so much, Mr. GIDWANI. I think that was also a very comprehensive response. We have another question now. And that relates, I think it's partially related to what we discussed in our previous webinar, but still I think it's important. And that is about illicit enrichment or unjustified wealth. We know that there is this offense in Hong Kong criminal law. So the question is there a time limit between the acquisition of the assets and until the period when they can be confiscated? So what are the time limits established in Hong Kong law?
Well, actually, as far as Section 10, that goes with illicit enrichment, and that only applies to public servants, right? It does not apply to private sector. Anything that's happened during his employment with the Hong Kong government, there's no time limit as such. But the time limit is not introduced by law. The time limit is introduced by banks, because banks do not keep records for more than 7 years. So the problem we have is that if we have to look for bank records to try and prove our case, if you're going beyond 7 years, the banks do not necessarily give us those documents because the banks by law are allowed to destroy those documents. So then it becomes very difficult for us to prove our case with incomplete evidence. So by law, there is no limit. In practicality, there's a limit of 7 years.
Okay. Thank you so much. It's interesting that indeed, although we may not have legal limitations, but practically it may be very hard to actually obtain evidence beyond a certain time period. Very good. So I think we also have some additional questions also from our side.
Yes.
And we have observed all these very interesting cases, and what we can see is that actually it looks like you have a very structured and coordinated approach in integrating forensic accounting in your work, because obviously you need to present to the court a very organized and comprehensive evidence on financial transactions to be successful. Could you please tell us more how the work in forensic accounting is organized in ICAC and also other law enforcement agencies in Hong Kong?
I think I'll leave that to Calvin to answer because Calvin is a forensic accountant in that group. But before I pass it on to Calvin, let me just say this, that the ICAC takes pride in being the only law enforcement agency in Hong Kong that has a forensic accounting group. As you could have seen from some of our cases, that some of the fund flow tracing is quite complex. It's not only tracing, but we also look at listed companies. And these are actually technical matters which we need the help of forensic accountants, which Calvin will explain in a minute. But when we started, I mean, of course, I am today in charge of asset recovery. But when I joined the ICAC, I joined the ICAC as a forensic accountant. And at that time, there were only 2 forensic accountants in the ICAC having a strength of about 1,200 officers. And then we realized the importance of building on our forensic accounting expertise. And that has, so if any investigator, a frontline investigator, is investigating what you call the corruption aspect or the crime, needs assistance from forensic accountants, they will then what you call subcontract that to the forensic accountants to say, you please help us with that whilst they go on getting the other part of the evidence. So let me just pass on to Calvin, and he'll probably give you a bit more insight as to what the forensic accounting group does for the ICAC.
Sure. Let me explain a little bit more about what us forensic accountants do on a day-to-day basis. So basically, because not all our frontline officers have the necessary accounting knowledge, that's the reason why when some of, and corruption is all about, economic commercial crimes. So occasionally, when we are in face of sort of complex accounting and financial questions, they would come to the forensic accounting group and look for forensic accountants for their support. So that's our main work. But today's topic is on asset recovery. So let me elaborate a little bit more on how we work with asset recovery office. So basically, forensic accounting and asset recovery are 2 very different type of specialized knowledge. And then we work together with each other closely. So for example, during financial investigation, where forensic accountants are normally heavily involved in. So particularly recently, we are seeing a rising trend to focus on asset recovery at an early stage. So we'll actually work with asset recovery office and consult Sudhir on a timely basis to see whether or not our financial investigation or what's happening in the core investigation would have impacts or consequences when we are at the confiscation stage. So likewise, occasionally, in a case of asset recovery cases where accounting documents are concerned, so we'll also work with colleagues from Asset Recovery Office to see whether we are able to render support. For example, in the earlier case involving the private company illegal rebates case, if companies' accounts are involved, of course, we are also more than happy to give some of our views to share and to see what are the best outcomes that we can achieve. So that's the way how forensic accountants and Asset Recovery Office work together to achieve synergy here in ICAC. So.
And can I add that previously frontline investigators, as I said, they get bogged down in trying to find evidence of crime. We are now trying to ascertain and trace assets as soon as possible, because once we know that a crime has been committed, we have to restrain those assets. The point is that if somebody is charged an offense and then we don't know where the assets are, we can't restrain anything. So we start at an early stage to try and ascertain where the assets are, so that if they're going to be charged, then we can immediately get a restraint order and then freeze those assets.
Thank you so much. I think that is very important and useful. And we know that in many countries, and also in particular in the region covered by the RNWCA network, many jurisdictions and law enforcement agencies, they experience challenges in organizing this forensic work. So I think you have very good practical examples that could be also a very good lesson and also model how this kind of work could be improved in the region. And we also have another question. So let me read it out for you. And that is basically on your impressions about the dynamics and success of your work. So do you actually have any benchmarks or average measures of success in your asset recovery and restitution cases? Do you see your current performance as optimal? And do you think maybe there is a room for improvement?
There's always room for improvement. I mean, okay, I think let's say when we restrain assets, we can only confiscate upon conviction. So we do have cases. So it's very difficult to say, put a benchmark and say we have restrained X amount, so therefore we must confiscate X minus 1. It does not work that way, because when we restrain certain assets, it happens many times that defendants get acquitted at trial, and then we have to discharge the restraint order. We do not carry on confiscation. But if you ask for a benchmark as to how much do we confiscate after conviction, then I would say, again, that there are two things. One is, after he's convicted, we can only confiscate what he has. We cannot confiscate what he does not have. So for example, if he has benefited $100, but he only has assets of $60, we can only confiscate 60. So it would be incorrect on our part to put a benchmark and compare benefit versus confiscation. So I give you an example. In that case, I talked about the derivative warrants case. We said the benefit is 123 million, but the confiscation was only 63. Why? Why is it less? I'll tell you this. When we restrained his assets, in fact, we restrained more than 120 million. We restrained more than 120 million, but then the restraint order was varied to the extent that we had to release money for his living expenses. We had to release money for his legal expenses. So, and then because he went to trial in the High Court, and then he went to appeal, and then he had a retrial, and then he again went into appeal, all that took 5 years. So over a period of 5 years, we had released living expenses, not only for him, but for his wife, for his family. We also had to what you call release money for his legal expenses, which are very expensive in Hong Kong. So after having restrained assets of more than 120 million, at the time of confiscation, he was only left with 63 million. So we are now left with 63 million. And we have now got a confiscation order for 63 million. So what should be the benchmark? are we getting, if we get 63 out of 63, I'll say we recovered 100%. But if you say that his proceeds of crime was 120 million, but we have only recovered 63, then we only recovered 50%. So it's very difficult to draw a benchmark here because our hands are tied. The law permits us to release money for legal expenses. The law permits us to release money for living expenses. What could we do? So there is no benchmark. But if you look at benchmark in the terms of confiscation of the number of assets he has, if he's convicted, how much do we confiscate? It's more than 90%. So that way, I think we are doing well.
Okay.
Is there room for improvement? Yes, I think I would love to confiscate more. But I mean, we try and focus on high-profile cases. Everybody is, manpower is limited. So yes, I mean, I would like to say yes, there's room for improvement, but we are doing the best we can. That's all I can say.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. GIDWANI. And if you maybe could stay with us for a few more minutes, because we still have some additional questions from the audience, and I think they are very interesting and also important. So maybe I'll just read them both, and you can decide how you can give us your feedback to those questions. So the first question is interesting, and it's about how you get information about the cases. Is it through whistleblowers, and do whistleblowers feel safe in Hong Kong? Are they protected when they provide such information? And second question, it's very important for the region, in particular for Uzbekistan. And this is the issue of asset and income declarations. What is your opinion about this? And it's not directly relevant, but still important. So if you have time, please give us some feedback. So how do you ensure that public disclosure of information in asset declarations does not violate privacy or expose officials to undue risk while maintaining transparency? So please give us, depending on your time, because we understand that we actually already used all our allocated time, but it's up to you, and we would be quick.
یعنی که وقت ما به پایان میرسه.
Yeah, no problem. I can answer that pretty quickly. Public officials in Hong Kong do not need to make any declaration on asset declaration. All we need to do is to declare if we have any conflict of interest. Now, we in the ICAC have to declare if we have, for example, if we have shares in a company, in a public listed company, we need to declare that because we cannot investigate that if there's any allegation against that company. So that's basically from the point of view of conflict of interest. It's not for the point of view to see whether we are maintaining a standard of living disproportionate to our income. So that is only if we start an investigation on a subject, then we can by law serve a notice on him saying that he has to declare all his assets to us. So even when I go for asset recovery, under the law, he has to make disclosure of all his assets so I can then restrain assets that I'm not aware of. If I'm investigating him for corruption, a public official for corruption, I can by law, under a particular section, force him to make disclosure of all his assets to see whether he is guilty of maintaining a standard above his living. So in general, public servants here do not have to make disclosure of assets. So there is no question of what you call there's no question of violating privacy. Going back to the first question on whistleblowers, yes, I mean, yes, whistleblowers, there are whistleblowers who come in and lodge complaints, and yes, we have laws to protect whistleblowers. I mean, you also have cases, look, corruption is a thing where somebody gives a bribe, he accepts the bribe, but does not deliver. Then the offer of the bribe is, of course, he's going to feel hurt about it. And you could have the offer of the bribe coming and say, look, I paid a bribe and this man did not deliver what he promised to deliver. Of course, the offer of the bribe has also committed an offense for having offered the bribe. But then we do have cases where they come in and say, look, So there could be anyone who could come in and lodge a complaint with the ICAC and say, look, I'm aware that the same thing. He may not be a party to the bribe, but he's aware of a bribery transaction having taken place. So we are open 24 hours. People can come in and make a complaint and lodge a complaint. They can write it by letter. They can send an email. We will accept a complaint from anyone. So a complaint that comes in is then classified, is looked by a directorate every morning. They will look at the complaint, and if they decide that the complaint is pursuable, they will then pass it on to investigation team to investigate. So yeah, I mean, anyone, a whistleblower could come. Any member of the public is open to come in and lodge a complaint if he has any, what you call, information on corruption.
Thank you so much. And I think that would be the last question for our session. Obviously, you have generated a lot of interest. And the question is also technical. It's about the management of seized assets, and basically how do you preserve personal and real assets that are subject to the case pending litigation. It's a question from dear Francis Chavez of PCJJ Philippines.
Right, okay. It depends on the asset. I mean, we don't take, if we are seizing cash or we're seizing gold, then we have a strong room in our office where this thing is seized. So it's easy to preserve that asset if it's just cash or gold or something that's very valuable. But if it's real property, the property remains, we don't take control, we don't take physical control of the property. The property still remains with the defendant. We only then file the restraint order with the land registry. We do not allow that property to be sold. So anybody, if he tries to dispose the property, he cannot dispose it, because a potential buyer, when he does a search on the land registry, he will realize that this property is restrained. Now, if you're looking at things like, for example, and I give you an example, I think I gave it last time as well, and I'll repeat it, where somebody had 23 race horses, and he wanted me to, what you call, release money for the maintenance of the race horses. Now, I don't take the race horses in my custody. I actually encourage that the race horses be sold, and the money that we get from the sale of the race horses, we put into a restrained bank account. Again, if you're talking of a very valuable car, or if you're looking at an aircraft, or if you're looking at a ship, or you're looking at a boat, again, we will not take custody of the shares of the boat or the aircraft. We will just make sure that he cannot transfer ownership of those assets. The maintenance of the assets is down to the defendant. If the maintenance is going to be very expensive, I will not release money for maintaining that asset. I will say we sell the asset and put the money into a restrained bank account. Because if we release money, a huge amount of money for maintaining the asset, I'm concerned that there will not be sufficient assets to confiscate at the end.
Thank you so much. I think we had got very comprehensive responses in this limited time. And indeed, I think each question probably it would require a separate webinar, because they are so technical and important. But we are very grateful for your time, for all the experiences that you have shared with us. And I believe I can also speak on behalf of our audience. So thank you so much. It's our pleasure to work with you. And let me thank you again and all the participants on behalf of RNWCA, DC, and also regional UNCLAC Fast Track platform. Thank you so much, and all the best and success in your important work.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to present our cases and to share with all the listeners. Much appreciated. Thank you again.
Thank you.